Today's recording is going to focus on building persuasive arguments. 3 key learning objectives this week. Number 1, identify the process of constructing persuasive arguments. Number 2, utilize patterns of persuasive reasoning. And thirdly, avoid common fallacies that undermine persuasion. Fallacies are errors in judgment, sometimes intentional, sometimes unintentional. So we need to identify them and prevent them. So let's first look at the process of constructing your persuasive arguments. The key issue as you build your persuasive argument is to make sure you focus your persuasive issue. So instead of tackling save the earth, maybe your purpose statement becomes purchase a reusable water bottle. As you know, we only have 5 to 6 minutes for this speech. So to really create something that is persuasive in nature and has an action item that is feasible, we need to refine our topic, something scalable to this assignment. Then we gather our evidence. Now again, as you're gathering evidence, think about the proofs we worked on: logos, pathos, ethos, mythos, and make sure that your evidence supports different styles of proofs. Because remember, everyone in the audience is motivated and persuaded differently. So a variety speaks to your research, but it also calls to a higher level and amount of people in the audience. Okay, so our second objective, let's look at patterns of reasoning. 3 patterns we will look at: deductive, inductive, and analogical. So let's first take a peek at deductive reasoning. Let me stretch my screen here a bit. Okay, deductive reasoning. The key word there is deduce. Deductive reasoning is reasoning from a general principle to a specific conclusion, okay? So we take big picture, general ideas, and we deduce that information to a specific situation. So for example, all students eat pizza. Well, Emily's a student, let's say at NSU, therefore Emily eats pizza. So we are taking a general principle and we're making a specific conclusion. Second example, all athletes work out in the gym. Colin Kaepernick is an athlete, therefore Colin Kaepernick works out in the gym. This is basically allowing the audience to agree to a general principle, right? We can all agree that all students enjoy pizza. And then from that, after they've agreed to the general principle, draw attention to the specific conclusion, okay? So we start at the bottom with a big picture idea and we deduce to one specific conclusion. The second style of reasoning then is inductive. Very similar, however, it takes the opposite structure. Inductive reasoning is reasoning from a specific or factual instance to reach a general conclusion. Okay, so let's look at some examples. One you can probably relate to in the world of college learning. Samantha took Renee Bangerter's English 1A and got an A. So that's our evidence. Second piece of evidence, John took English 1A and got an A. Third piece of evidence, I also know that Mike took her 1A class and got an A. So this is our theory. This is our evidence, our hypothesis. So we draw the conclusion that if I take Renee Bangerter's English 1A, I will get an A2. Now this is a very simple example, but I think we've all done that, especially when previewing what classes to take from whom. We take multiple evidence, a theory, and we induce, we make a specific conclusion from it. Excuse me. The third type of reasoning we will look at is analogical. This is where we create a strategic perspective on a subject by relating it to something similar, okay? So you'll see some semi-recent arguments in the political realm using analogical reasoning, comparing Barack Obama to JFK, comparing Sarah Palin to Dan Quayle, Hillary Clinton comparing herself to Rocky, comparing marijuana laws with the Prohibition era, and comparing the war in Iraq with the war in Vietnam. So what we're doing here is we're taking two similar things at different periods of time, and we are making assumptions based off the parallels. So a very simple visual here, we see a red dress, A. On the B side, you'll see this is the storage device for the red dress, right? So now we're going to use that same analogical reasoning to complete the second puzzle. We have a carton of milk, C. What is our analogy, our analogical reasoning as to what the answer to D would be? Well, if we're looking at the AB scenario, it would obviously be where we store the milk. Therefore, that would be the refrigerator. Okay, so we use analogies. We use similarities. We relate to things to predict an outcome. Third and final objective is to understand and not use fallacies. Fallacies are simply error in reasoning and misuse of evidence that makes a persuasive message just simply unreliable. As we've discussed, ethics is central to public speaking, and it is absolutely paramount to being persuasive. So we never misuse evidence, we never misuse logic. We want to be clear and straightforward. So to understand this, we have to recognize what fallacies are out there and how they are commonly used. The first is that of a red herring. For those of you who love a good mystery novel or a detective movie, typically there's going to be some person of interest that doesn't turn out to be the actual murderer, right? Or the actual criminal. That is a red herring. As you can see, I'm here to distract you. A red herring distracts listeners with sensational and or irrelevant information. So in the world of persuasion, we might see an example like this. Why worry about pandas becoming extinct when we have homeless people in our country? Now, pandas and homeless people are both certainly worth worrying about. But what this fallacy does is it tries to distract with something sensational and then draw attention or debunk the importance of, for in this example, homeless people. That is a red herring. It's meant to distract. Second fallacy we're going to look at is the straw figure. And as you go through the gallery of fallacies, there's a figure in your chapter that walks you through 13 different fallacies. I picked about half of them for purposes of this recording. Those fallacies that I believed deemed a little bit more explanation to understand. Okay, so there are a total of 13 in your textbook. Please be sure to read them all. I am tackling the ones that are a bit more complicated. Okay, so going back to our straw figure. Straw figure fallacy, creating a likeness of an opposing position that makes it seem trivial, extreme, and easy to refute. Okay, so that is the straw man. Just like the red herring is meant to distract, the straw man is meant to fall apart. It is not reliable. It can easily be blown over in the wind. Okay, so the straw man fallacy, arguing against an oversimplified or distorted version of your opponent's argument. So a more recent example, distorting the Black Lives Matter movement, basically making the claim that anyone who supports Black Lives Matter is essentially saying they hate all white people. Now that is a very extreme and painful example of the straw man fallacy. But it's taking an opposing position and making yours seem trivial, extreme, and easy to fall apart. Another example on the right, you want to increase public funding for education, do you? Tell me more about your communist policies. So essentially the straw man here is communism. If you are for increasing funding for education, you are supporting communist positions. These are examples of straw man fallacies, again, oversimplified or a distorted version of the argument. The next fallacy, begging the question. Okay, begging the question is making an assumption. It's asserting a claim that has not been proven with evidence. So you'll look to this image here. Basically, if you use this fallacy, you are saying, well, if A happens, then B. Or if B happens, then A is a must. A couple examples here. So we have a little speaker here who's speaking on paranormal activity. Susie says, paranormal activity exists because I've experienced things that can only be described as paranormal activity. So Susie is taking an experience that is exclusive to her own and saying that it can only be paranormal activity. She is indeed begging the question. She's assuming something that has not been proven by any way, shape, or form. Other ways in which we can beg the question might just be simply putting the cart or the horse in front of the cart in our word choice. So for example, useless and wasteful plastic grocery bags should be banned. Why is this an example of begging the question? Well, we've assumed some things in our word choice. We've assumed that plastic grocery bags are useless and wasteful. Now that might be ways in which we use or don't use plastic bags, but there's an assumption there that the audience assumes plastic grocery bags are useless and wasteful. Now, don't get me wrong, I have more plastic grocery bags in my house than I can shake a stick at. However, I do reuse them. I keep all my Target bags for waste paper basket liners and so forth. I take my dog for a walk. I got my grocery bag ready for poop pickup. So just some small examples how word choice even can beg the question. Okay, next fallacy, either or, okay? Presenting a situation as if there are only two options that are mutually exclusive. A fallacy that presents only two choices. And in reality, the world is not black or white. A couple great social and political examples, pro-life or pro-choice. Both sides of that social issue have very defined camps. And if you are not pro-life, you are pro-choice. If you are not pro-choice, you are pro-life. Other examples we see in politics, Democrat versus Republican, right? Our elephant versus our donkey, that there is no in between. You are one or the other. Very simple examples of either or thinking. We cannot present an argument this way because the logical listener is going to say there has to be more approaches or answers than these two. Next is the slippery slope fallacy. The slippery slope fallacy is just that. If you envision sliding down a slippery slope or hill, arguing that one bad event will eventually lead to the others. The sky is falling. A couple relevant examples as of late, especially in South Dakota. If we legalize marijuana now, next they will legalize all other drugs and then crime will explode. So we are taking this small example, let's even say legalizing medical marijuana and assuming that that's going to lead to legalizing recreational marijuana and then heroin and cocaine and methamphetamines and so forth. We are taking a slippery slope approach to our argument, which is just simply not founded in reason. We are explaining consequences to something that is likely not to happen. Okay, next up, we have the post hoc fallacy, and that is where we basically take proxemics in time with causation, and we confuse that one is going to cause the other. So event B immediately happens after event A. Therefore, event A is the cause of event B. A tweet here, before Obamacare, there had never been a confirmed case of Ebola in the US. You can see that they are taking event A, Obamacare, and assuming that event B, Ebola, happened because of it. That is a post hoc fallacy. And then we have two left. Myth of the mean. Myth of the mean is using an average score, an average measurement of data to hide a problem. I love this comic. Numbers don't lie. That's where we come in. And I think something that is very close to home is, the poverty rates of the American Indian population in South Dakota. Now, by average, our state does okay. But if we look at the actual data, we have some extreme poverty in our state that is hidden very well. Okay, quickly, our last fallacy, equivocation, exploiting the ambiguity of language. That's just simply where we use words to mislead. So as long as I have $160, then I'm fine to park where I want, right? That's a $160 fine. Okay, 3 objectives we tackled this week. Most importantly, recognize patterns of reasoning and avoid fallacy.